Thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you, Alexandra, Sofia, and all the team of the NOMO project, which I think it's a very, very, very amazing project, and I have seen it growing from the beginning, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here. So I'm going to talk about the monumental works of Eduardo Chillida. Eduardo Chillida created more than 40 sculptures, 40 public monumental sculptures in public spaces, all of them related to the landscape, related to the architecture, related to the nature, to the environment, having in account the environment of the sculpture. And it was also a research about the forms, the shapes. So I will try to do it in a chronological order. My idea is to start from the very beginning and to continue until his last sculpture. You can imagine more than 40, 50 years of creation are too much. This is the first one. Mikel has already mentioned this relation with Greece, which I will repeat it, but it's very evident in this first work. This first work is for the 48. It's a torso. As you can see, it's very figurative. From the very beginning, the first torso he did, this one is cast on bronze, but the first one he did was made on plaster and received a prize in the Salon de Mai in Paris. And he was recognized as a great sculptor at the very beginning of his artistic career, which is very, very, very impressive. And he was related with this amazement of Chillida with the Greek art and with the shapes and the forms and the rigorous lines. More than a figurative work, is also, we can see the energy, the relation with the space here, and the energy of the lines that we can recognize later in other sculptures of Chillida. This one was a homage to his friend Perico Arana, who worked in the town council of San Sebastian, and he created this first commission, which was very figurative. In 1954, he realized that, yes, this first important or most important commission. He was commissioned to create a sculpture for the Basilica of Aránzazu, who is like the place of encounter of the Basque contemporary artists of the 20th century. And Chillida was commissioned to create the doors of the Basilica, and he will create 4 doors. And as you can see, he has cut with the figurative, he has abandoned the body, and he has started working with geometrical forms. As you can see, some shapes, linear and rectangular shapes, and creating and connecting spaces with these shapes. So, which is important here also, is that he will use iron. I won't talk about iron because we have talked yet about it, but iron is a metal, comes from his town, his homeland, the Basque Country. So it was a very important discovery for him. He started working with iron and working with abstract forms and working with the space at the same moment. So when he started working with iron, it was like the big change of his career and the beginning of a new language, of a new artistic language at this time. Years later, he was commissioned this sculpture that you have seen before, but which is interesting is that it's the 5th of a series of sculptures that are called Abesti Gogorra. Abesti Gogorra in Basque means harsh song or strong song. It's connected with a very special song or noise that the Basque call irrintzi. Maybe tomorrow Aizpea can speak about it. They use it well, in the fiestas and in the parties, but at the beginning it was a sound for communication. And what Chillida makes with the material is that he expands the material in the space. He articulates the space with the matter, and he gives shapes to the space. The other one was 66, this one is 68, this one is Murmuring of Limits, Sounds of Limits. In this sculpture, we have another concept belonging to Chillida, which is the concept of limit. It was very important for him because to create this space, you need to put limits to the space. Here, again, we have this relation with Heidegger and this idea of creating the spaces with the use of these limits. But the limit is something open, because the limit is like the present. You never know when finishes the past and when begins the future, and we live in a present without limits. And he works with these limits that is in a very open way. And he will continue. This one is placed in front of the World Bank in Washington in the United States. The name of this sculpture is Around the Void 5, is the fifth one of the series. And here we can see also this dialogue between the curves and his dialogue between the inner spaces in the outside space, the interaction with the voids in the middle in the heart of the sculpture. This one is made of stainless steel, which was not very common in his work. That's important because the stainless steel is always the same. It doesn't have the quality of the curtain steel that he will use later. A much more bigger sculpture. You see how the scale is changing also, and it's getting bigger and bigger because for him it was very important that the public work dialogue with the environment, with the buildings, with the landscapes. So it depends on where he had to put the sculpture. He will work with the scale. So this one is a monumental work, which is in Düsseldorf, in Germany. He had 9 public works in Germany. He used to say that his work speaks German. So this one was commissioned by the ThyssenKrupp for the city of Düsseldorf. And as you can see, there are 3 blocks connected, but it has only 2 points of a point. The sculpture is defying gravity. He made some cuts in the steel, and he dialogues between masses, emptinesses, and voids. It's always the same dialogues, but always with the same idea of creating this articulation of the space. And we continue with another one, and it's the second one of the series of Lugar de Encuentros, place for encounters or meeting points. We will see several sculptures of the same series. This one is related to another series of Chillida, which is called Envil of Dreams, Yunque de Sueños. The interesting thing of this sculpture is that he plays with verticality and horizontality. He plays with this vertical form or this vertical shape, and at the up side of the work, he will create a volume that is open to the space, and he will create a space where something is happening. In Chillida's work, the space is not, the void is not the nothing. There is something that there is a certain tension inside the voids of Chillida. That is what is interesting in his work, because the space is like a matter, but a faster matter for him. And here again, we have Lugar de Encuentros 3, Place for Encounters 3. I don't say much more about this, but what is interesting is the presence of gravity. So he had a fight against Newton. He will say that, yes, I accept the law, but I will go against the law. That is why he will use very heavy materials, but he will try to make them more lighter, and he will fight, and he will try to create a lightness. No, and you can see that it's maybe 5 tons or concrete steel, no, and it seems to be floating in gravity in the space, which is huge, and changing shapes and changing the aesthetic, but creating other kind of spaces. Here we have another sculpture that is placed in Lund, in Sweden. The title of the sculpture is Campo Espacio de Paz. The name in English is Space for Peace, Countryside Space of Peace. And this sculpture is made on basalt, which is the only one of his artistic career made on basalt. It was a stone from Sweden, and the craftsmen from Sweden created this sculpture. And which is interesting here is like a sort of puzzle. The sculpture is made by different pieces, and if you remove the pieces, the piece which is inside will get free. And which is interesting is that we can enter and we can inhabit the spaces with our body. We can embody the spaces. Eulogy of the Architecture or Embrace of Architecture 2 from 1972 also. Here in the title, we have a subject very important for Chillida, which is architecture. He started studying architecture, but he never finished his career because he was looking for something more. He had a lot of questions, but he had no answers. And he used to say that architecture needed answers and no questions. This is the first one, which is a homage to architecture. And here again, we can see this dialogue between a vertical shape and a horizontal one, and this openness to the space, and this relation with the space, with the outer spaces and with the inner spaces, of course. This one is from the same series. In 1973, he will create Lugar de Encuentros 4, Place for Encounters 4. This one is in the outside of the Museum of Fine Arts of Bilbao. It's just outside, and you can see it's hanging also, and it's the same idea of ingravity. And he was thinking that it was the space or the air that lifted the sculpture. And we continue with Place for Encounters. This one is the fifth one. This one is in the city of Toledo, near the walls of the old city. You can see here also the relationship with the buildings and with the environment. And here is the contrary. So the sculpture stands in only one point. You can see here the base, and it's open to the space also. We have seen it with Ana Maria. No, it's another one of the series. Which is interesting is the idea of he was always answering to the same question, but in a different aesthetical way, because the shapes are different, the sizes are different, but there is always this relation between different shapes and this interconnection and these spaces, these voids that are in tension all the time. This one is not in a public space, but yes, because it's in a church in San Sebastian. If you go to San Sebastian, there is a church, it's called Santa Maria, and inside the church you can find this sculpture, which is called Gurutz. Gurutz in Basque means cross. It's a cross, but made on alabaster, and which is interesting here is that the cross is the emptiness. It's what we cannot see, but that has an entity. It is related to the idea of spirituality in the works of Chillida. I mean, Chillida was a very spiritual person. He was Catholic, but if he was born, for example, in Japan, he would be Zen, or because he was very interesting in mysticism, and he was very interesting also in Eastern philosophies, and for him, the void and the emptiness connect with something spiritual. He was very interesting also in mysticism, in Spanish mysticisms, for example. I don't know if you have heard about San Juan de la Cruz, the poet, or Santa Teresa de Jesus. So they are the writers that Chillida already knew and read their poetries. And I won't say that much about this picture, because you already know it, The Come of the Wind. I will talk tomorrow more about it because I think that it's the best sculpture he has done, and it's a well example of how to create places of encounter with nature and of encounter with the environment and with the landscape. In the Comb of the Wind, he worked with an architect, with a Basque architect, Peña Gancheri, and he will work with him also to create this place, this square. And I won't stop here either because I want to explain it better tomorrow. I will talk about the relationship between the sculptures and the ethical values of Chillida. After doing this monument, he will make a tribute to one Spanish poet who was called Jorge Guillén, was a poet from the 27th generation, so he was older than Chillida, of course. But they met together in Harvard University when Chillida was invited to be a visiting professor there. Guillén already knew about the book of Heidegger. Once he said to Chillida, Chillida, you know that I have too a nice handwriting. So they decided to create a book together. And after this collaboration, when Jorge Guillén died, Chillida decided to make a tribute to him, and he created several sculptures. I don't have here the pictures, but they are sculptures that are called Lo profundo es el aire, How Profound is the Air, which is a verse of the poet Jorge Guillén, in which the essential thing is the void, is what we cannot see, is the emptiness in the sculpture. And he created this sculpture made of steel for the city of Valladolid, which was the city of the poet. And the sculpture is in dialogue also with the walls of the Museum of Sculpture of Valladolid. And this place is called Las Cadenas de San Gregorio, the chains. If you see the shapes, it reminds us to the chains. It's always the same. Chillida didn't used to say that he wasn't an abstract sculptor. He was inspired by the shapes he saw. So inspired by the chains of the Cadenas de San Gregorio, he created this special. It's like a door also, and in the center of the sculpture you have this tension and this space. The same idea is a homage. Chillida did several homages to several personalities, not only people he had already known, as Jorge Guillén or I don't know, Balerdi, but he created some homages to Bach, his great composer, and this Kandinsky also. Niki Lauda, Salvador Allende, Pablo Neruda, Balenciaga. Well, the list is very, very, very long. And this one is a homage to a Basque poet who was called Lizardi. And for him, he created a window for his poems and a window for us to see the nature who was very present in the poems of Lizardi. Well, and we continue. This one is in Barcelona, and it has a Greek name. It's Topos, it's place. He created this special place related to the building. It's a medieval building, so Chillida makes a sort of dialogue between the shapes, and these semicircular shapes are in dialogue with the windows of the church. And he has created, we only can see one part of the sculpture, but the sculpture is like closing the square. But if you go round, it is an open space, of course. And we can go inside the sculpture. We can inhabit it also. And we have changed the scale because of the material also. This sculpture is made of concrete. Why? He started working with concrete because concrete permitted him to change the scale. And if he had to make a commission for a place, as I told you before, it was very important to this dialogue with the landscape and this dialogue with the buildings and with the environment. So this one is a big architecture. It is a house. It is the first house that we do. It is a house for Goethe, for the German poet, one of the most important German poets, of course. And he will do several houses, another house for Bach, for example. But if this is the only one who he really realized as in these bigger sizes, I will read because Chillida explained it better than I do. So, 2 centers, not one. They will express doubt, uncertainty, the product of intelligence that characterized Goethe. From that stems the requirement that the floor of his house should be elliptical, in accordance with my first idea. In later solutions, the 2 centers are kept, but with only one on the floor. The other rises up to the height of the man's head, enabling one, from that spot, to draw an arc that has something of triumph, door, ring, but not of the past, as rings tend to be, but of the future. The house of a man like Goethe could not have a roof. The light he sought was to be his roof. So he created a house without a roof, because the light will be the roof for Goethe. And following these works in concrete, and this idea of fighting the gravity, he created this sculpture for Barcelona. This one is called In Praise of Water, Elogio del Agua. It's hanging from the walls of an ancient. The interest of this work is like it's related to the myth of Narcissus. The sculpture is completed with its reflection on the water. I will talk more about this work from the 87 called Gure Aitaren Etxea, Our Father House. It is another special house, but let it for tomorrow. In 1989, the French Ministry of Culture commissioned to Chillida. He asked him to create a sculpture to mark the bicentenary of the French Revolution. Recalling the revolution cry, liberty, equality, and fraternity, Chillida opted to use the last one, fraternity. And he decided to create a tree. A tree because it's like a metaphor. He was alluding to the idea of all men and women, despite our differences, we have a common origin. We cannot see the picture, but it is engraving in the sculpture this sentence written by Chillida. This tree of iron, born in this forest, declares that we men share the same origin. It is calling for fraternity. Another subject in Chillida's work, it is music. We haven't talked about music. This is a sculpture that is in Dallas. This sculpture is in dialogue with the IMP Meyerson Symphony Center. The title of the sculpture is On Music, about music. It is also the title of a book written by the philosopher Saint Augustine. In this book, Saint Augustine speaks about science and numbers and metrics, and how the music is related also to mathematics, and how mathematics and numbers can help us to reach to the spirituality. So it's very interesting because Chillida plays a homage to the philosopher with this series of sculpture, which in this one we have 2 columns, and from each columns we have 3 shapes. The number 3 is also a number who was very important for Chillida, and the 3 branches of each of the sculpture are looking to each other in a certain tension, and there is always this space between the shapes, between the forms. Miquel has already say it, but you can see this sculpture in Face of Horizon, which is from the same year, the 89. It's in relation also with the elements, with the cosmos, with the sea, with the horizon, and it has 10 meters height, so you can imagine the measures of this colossal sculpture in front of the horizon. This one is the second version of a sculpture he created in 55. I haven't mentioned it because it was a commission by the town council of San Sebastian, but the sculpture was removed from his place. And in 91, he worked with a local architect and friend, Joaquin Montero, to create the space for this sculpture, which is a homage to Fleming, another homage to another personality. He created it the year of the death of the famous scientist Fleming, no? And that is who discovered the penicillin, as you know. This was a commission from the BBVA, which is a bank from the Basque Country, and this sculpture was placed in the Gran Via, which is one of the main streets in Bilbao. Now they have removed it from the place because the place has changed, but which is important to see that the importance of the place for Chillida, because when he created a sculpture, it needed always to have a direct relation with the buildings and with the environment. Here is an elegy to iron, and again, iron was his favorite material. It was the most important material for Chillida. This one is a sculpture which is in Helsinki, and the name of the sculpture is Helsinki. But the idea is about another series which is called Lotura, which means knot or union, and you can see this sort of knot created by these shapes of curtain steel that are embracing them together. This is another homage to another friend of Chillida who was called Rafael Valerdi, and it's a big hug to his friend. It's a small one, for example. This one is like this size, and it's very nice because it's looking to San Sebastian. If you go to San Sebastian, you can follow the steps of Chillida. This one is Dialogue Tolerance. It is in Munster. It's another commission to commemorate the Peace of Westphalia. The Peace of Westphalia was the beginning of the creation of the limits of what we know as Europe today. Chillida, to talk about peace, created two different banks, one in front of the other, because he used to say that it's very hard to talk about peace because the conflict is still there. So it's not comfortable, and the benches he created are not very comfortable also. This one is a homage to San Ignacio, to San Ignatius of Loyola. The name is in Basque also, Emparanza place or square in front of the Basilica of San Ignatius in Loyola. Here we have another Besarkada. Besarkada in Basque means hug. So it's really a word that embraces us. Again, the music is present in this work. It is the door of music, Porta de Música, which is in Santiago de Compostela. This one also is related to a building. We cannot see the building here, but he worked with Siza to choose the place where he will place the sculpture. And it's also a homage to music. We have the Embrace, the big Besarkada, which is, this one is in Germany, in the Sinclair House of Germany. It's the same idea of hugging or embracing. It's a strong embrace. And this one is in Trier, in Germany also. I will say the title of this sculpture is very significant because it's a coincidence of opposites. Because if you think of the name, Jaula de la Libertad, cage of freedom, it's like, it's a cage, but it's an open cage. And the freedom, you cannot have the freedom locked in a place, no? Which is very interesting. This other one from 97 is made of alabaster also. It's Camino hacia la Paz, Path to Peace. It is in San Sebastian also. But on the contrary of the first cross we have seen, the first cross is a cross made by the emptiness, and this one is made by the matter. Which is interesting here is that the two crosses are connected. The cathedral of the Buen Pastor and the Santa Maria Church are connected together, so you can match the two crosses in a certain point. This one is in Munich. It has 8 meters high, called Buscando la Luz, Searching for Light. He created this space, this architectural space, that we can inhabit with our own body. Also related to this idea, not only this natural idea of the light that gives life, but also of this idea, this metaphorical idea or metaphysical idea of searching for knowledge, of searching for light. There are three of them because it's a homage to the three Pinacotheques, the modern, the Altes, and the ancient Pinacothek. This one is in Bilbao. It's called Begirari, which is a lookout, yes. So it's like a guardian, and it's very vertical, as you can see, and it's related to the bridge. The bridge was created by the engineer who was a friend of Chillida, Juan Antonio Fernández Ordóñez. This big sculpture dialogues with the bridge and with the Guggenheim Museum. If you go to Bilbao, it's close to the Guggenheim Museum. This big work is in Barcelona. It's a big mural just in front of the MACBA, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Barcelona. It's made of concrete, of refractory concrete, which is interesting also here. Of course, it's very architectonic. It has 15 meters and 6 meters high, so imagine the size of the work. And it's related to his paintings, of course, black and white, the matter and the space in dialogue. This other one is also a homage to music. It's not a very good quality. I have taken from the internet because we don't have a good picture of the sculpture in the place. It's a pity. We will have to visit Bonn and take a better picture. But which is interesting in this work, he creates a dialogue with the building, with the old cathedral of Bonn. We cannot see the cathedral here, but he was inspired by the shapes of the apsides. You have presented already this big sculpture, this homage to the reunification of the two Germanies in Berlin. This is one of the last sculpture, is Elogio del Aire, in praise of the air, which is in the airport of Bilbao. Even if it's very strong and heavy, it seems like it's floating in the space. No, it has this capacity. Chillida had the capacity of making something very heavy become light. And this is probably one of the latest. It has the same title. It's from the series of Begirari, of Look Out, the same series of the guard. But this one is 15 meters high also. This one is in a museum, it's placed in a museum in Germany, which the name of the museum is Insel Hombreutsch. It's a big museum of sculptures in open-air sculptures. This is a sculpture that Chillida created for Bilbao, for the city of Bilbao. Unfortunately, this sculpture is not in Bilbao, but I wanted to share it with you because Chillida is all around the world, his work is all around the world, and this sculpture is in front of the University of Qatar. For the moment I have finished, I think you have seen also the change of the shapes and how he has adapted to the different environments in different ways. The way Chillida has changed the aesthetic of his works, but always with this idea of create spaces, creating places, these places for encounter, these places that we can inhabit with our bodies. And tomorrow I will stop in some of the most important, or in my opinion, more important works of Chillida, and the relation also about the works with the human ethics and the human values. Thank you very much.